It's an emergency! After a year and a half elected with a low voter turnout, French President Emmanuel Macron's policies dismantled many public structures, turning them over to private corporations, therefore creating more profits for the rich and less benefits for everyone else. On November 17, 2018, a call to peacefully protest was made, and to the surprise of the protesters themselves, tens of thousands of people went to the Paris streets to protest the hike in the diesel tax, which was the trigger event, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. It is really a protest against the growing wealth inequality that had been developing over time. Since November, there have been hundreds of marches and protests in cities and towns organized on the weekends all around the country, and the Yellow Vest movement itself has expanded across Europe and even into Australia, Canada, Taiwan, and now the United States. There could be much more that we just don't even know about yet. In late January, the National Assembly of France, supported by the Senate there, passed the bill called the Anti-Breaker. As activist Roman Light said to a crowd in the city of Pau in the south of France, quote, to criminalize the right to demonstrate or at least to dissuade us by threatening us. He also said, this is an extremely serious infringement of one of our most cherished constitutional rights, which is our freedom to act. This decision is a historical moment because of its gravity when the representatives of the people try to stop the people to speak or to act. These same representatives instantly lose their legitimacy. By attacking the source of their power, us, they are weakening theirs. The representative is the one who is present in the place of the other, so he has no vocation to tell us what to do or what to think. He is the messenger of the people and the guarantor of the trust of the people. For too long, the people forgave their representatives for their errors and failings, sometimes by complacency, sometimes by laziness, sometimes by naivete. But now is the time to take back what belongs to us, our freedom to act, end quote. The primary focus with the growing number of people in France is the RIC. R-I-C stands for Referendum Initiated by the Citizens, which is the referendum idea itself. The term referendum is used across Europe and British Commonwealth countries to describe the legal constitutional mechanism that allows the people to create petitions on issues so that the majority votes on issues will be a more truly participatory kind of democracy. I'm going to be talking with Norm Davis about the Gilets jaunes movement, the Yellow Vests en anglais, and what we can do here in the USA with the constitutional process, referendums, proposals, measures, or something else. First of all, from the standpoint of French activist, organizer, and father Roman Light, who talks about RIC, Referendum Initiated by the Citizens, when I spoke to him in December 2018 from France. Referendum initiative.
Initiated by the citizens.
So exactly, explain to us how that started and actually what that is.
So, like in simple term, it's called a RIC, R-I-C. So referendum initiated by the citizens. It's a terminology that already exists in many places in the world. Like in Australia, they call it the CIR, citizen-initiated referendum. There's many expression of it in many countries. I think even in California and in America, they have a form of a referendum, but it's not exactly like the core essence of the RIC is the capacity from citizens to trigger national referendum from their own initiatives. So that's that simple idea. So referendum is when you ask the rest of the population to vote for an idea. So normally we are electing people to make decisions on our behalf, but what is new with this idea is that we can keep people in power, like they can actually be elected and they can keep their seat and be parliament or senators or whatever. But we want to have the power, the constitutional power to express our opinion, not in a peaceful and protesting way, but to impose that legally to the power in place. So like so far, the only people upset or disagreeing with this idea are people who think that people will be stupid enough to make stupid things. But the truth is that we all have common sense. Why? Because normal people are directly exposed to the mistakes that they're doing. And when they do something stupid, they get consequences and they learn from that perspectives. But when we're starting to study how the elite is operating, like the elites are doing really stupid things, but they don't learn about it because they have nothing to lose, because it's always the population which is paying for them. And this is actually defining a psychotic behavior. Like a psychopath is someone that basically is doing the same mistake over and over and over and over again and never learn from it because they never really get to face the consequences of its action. And this is what is creating that sensation of impunity that this elite is getting through, and never really learn anything because they never face the consequences of that. Like the only thing that they're facing is, oh, we're not going to be re-elected. Like after years and years and years, and now they're getting into a point where whoever is not re-electing, they're going to find ways to recycle them into whatever businesses in the private and in the public. So those people are really starting to create that kind of caste that is controlling the whole system. And we haven't yet realized that the only reason why those people are proliferating is only because we are powerless. We cannot stop them legally. Like, and that's such a simple statement to realize. Like the whole idea of the RIC is realizing that we have been programmed to be powerless constitutionally. The fact that in the constitution, we, the people, doesn't have a legal tool to stop the people in power, to control them if we want to, is the reason why no matter what we're going to do in the street, no matter how the Occupy, for example, movements were programmed to fail, is that they didn't make this analysis that if you're not changing the constitution and give the people the rights, the legal right to trigger a national referendum, then you will be condemned to be controlled by the people who just going to tell you what you have to do and what is good for you. And that's what the RIC is about. The RIC is about realizing that simple idea that we have been programmed to be powerless, not because we are powerless, because we are the power. We are the true power. The power doesn't come from the elite. The elite most of them couldn't even cook an egg, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
The true power is coming from us. We are the people making the value, creating exchange, producing value. And the fact that we do not have our word to say except going through our representative says a lot about what we can do.
All right. Hello, this is Niswander. You're watching the Nowman show. As you can see from that intro, that's one of the things, if not the main thing we're going to be talking about today. And my guest is Norman Davis, coming back to the Nowman show from the show Truth Noir. Thank you for coming back, Norm.
It's always a pleasure, man. Thanks.
Likewise. Of course, we got a lot to get into, so let's talk about this.
Yeah, man.
Yellow vest is, as you can see, I've got mine on.
Yeah, you know, I wear mine on my heart. You know,
I was going to say, where's yours?
It keeps the police from messing with me as much.
Well, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. But you know, this is the workers, though. This is the sign of the working class. I mean, you see it everywhere. You know, everywhere. You see it at the metro stations. You see it at construction sites. You see, you know, city workers that that have to do things outside.
Well, so. and you see homeless people that have nothing more than a bicycle to their name and maybe what they can carry on their back, wearing these because they want to be seen in the streets so that cars don't hit them. Like This is a fairly universal thing from the bottom up to the higher end working class people. I mean, there's it's a powerful statement when people take this up to protest their government instead of just wearing it to perform their job or whatever practical things they're trying to do in their life.
Exactly, and 99% plus of the people are peaceful, and they're just marching. So, of course, that kind of stuff's kind of boring to watch on TV.
Right.
But some, I mean, if you look at the right outlets online or whatever, you will see the behind the scenes, what's really going on, where the majority of the people actually are, just marching peacefully and to make a statement with all these yellow, thousands of yellow vests,
Yeah.
and it's all across the country. So one of the things I liked about, connecting with Roman Light was he points out the emphasis of the referendum. And he said, one of the things that he does when he goes out and marches is that if you write RIC, RIC on the back of the vest, you see it? See it? Okay. You write RIC on the back of the vest, then that's the people that you want to look for.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because they're not just there because of a specific issue, whatever that might be, which is all important. It's just that if you want to talk to somebody who understands that we don't have the power, and if you want to change all these issues, you got to have the power. So we need something that is already in the Constitution to use, right? To let our representatives know that we truly want to have participatory democracy, which means if we feel strongly about a particular issue, we want to have a referendum and vote on it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it isn't just saying, that I'm, pro-immigration or anti-immigration, or it isn't about any of these issues yet.
Overall, we should be able to propose an idea
Right.
and have it voted on within the year,
Right,
or something,
or less. You know what I mean? No, in Switzerland, it's less than that. So, and if you don't like the outcome, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is that we discussed that let's say you have 70% of the registered voters have to vote on whatever this issue is, or you have to get 70% of people's signatures, or no, 1%, because that's what they do in Switzerland. I think you get 1% of the citizens' signatures
for like a petition or
on a petition,
Yeah.
or something like that, right? And then that goes to a national vote, right? And then it's 70% of the registered voters have to vote on it, and then let's say it's a question like, let's do with one that's here, Green New Deal. Do you want the Green New Deal, right? And you can look at the legislation right online right now, recently proposed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her co-signers. You can look at that right now. Ocasio-Cortez, I think, congress.gov, and you can find that. So say you review that. You take the time to review the whole thing, right? And then you have a referendum that says, okay, the question is yes, no, or I don't know. So let's say 70% of the registered voters vote on it, and there's 30 to 40% of the people say, well, I don't know. I read it all, I don't know. Well, that means you don't have a conclusion, right? So
Right.
you have to go back and maybe Ocasio-Cortez and others would go back and they would redo something, right? Then they would put it out for a vote to the people again. Then once you get that majority, then it becomes law.
Yeah.
That's what participatory democracy should be. So that's what he's talking about. That's an example of what he's talking about, right? So I guess there's so much that we can get into, and we're going to do an extended segment as well. But I wanted to show another clip of what I feel that my focus is, and I think it's his focus too as well. Even before you get to the law, you have to just basically care about people. Period.
It helps, right?
Yeah.
Like why not?
So this clip, and then we can get into more conversation.
Sure.
Is really basically about compassion. This is Roman Light and I talking about compassion. I concur with you on the right-left thing. It's so much more fundamental than that. I think we really need to focus on compassion and just the whole of our global society. But when you have a lot of people who don't understand basic compassion and what that means, just that basic common sense understandings we've talked about, and you put them in the democratic process, it's not going to work, right? There has to be, people have to understand compassion and feel compassion and put compassion ahead of everything else. Then I think democracy can work, right? Once people are educated about the issues.
And just on the topic about compassion, I don't think compassion is something that can be taught. Like, it's something that life is teaching you. Like, it cannot be taught at school. I don't think the fact that people will make decisions based on selfishness and stuff like that will actually make any difference, because the RIC is a process. It is the same process that we all been through when we had to leave the house and stop believing that the parents which are there to take care of us have all the answers about what is good for us. Like, you know, we had to make that decision ourselves, leave that place that we call home, because like those parents were doing this for our own good. They were there to educate us and give us what we need to hear and what we need to do. But until we make that decision to get that power back and make that decision on our own behalf, then those people will not give it back to us. So it's time for us to rise as an adult and becoming politically powerful and becoming capable of making our own decisions and learn from the mistakes we're going to make, because we're not all wise and we are all making mistakes every day. And it's the only process that nature put in place to teach us how to grow. So let's make mistakes as quick as possible. Let's learn from those mistakes, and let's learn that compassion is the way, because you cannot force people to believe that. They will have to learn from themselves. Like, all the people who tell me, like, why are you not using your guns and shoot the cops who are beating you up? And like, you know what? Because those people are parents like us. They're moms and dads, and they have their own problem, and they have their own issue, and they have their family to feed, and they have their stress, and they have their things to do. So they are not the problem. Like, the problem is the fact that we are all powerless. It's not the military, it's not the economy, it's not the climate, it's not the rich, it's not the poor, it's not the left, the right, or whatever, the religion. It's the fact that we are all powerless. And until people will get that power back, and I'm saying back, like, we never had that power, but until the people will get this power, they will remain divided, weak, and inefficient. So the whole idea is not about being perfect and wise straight away. The whole idea is to be willing to grow and come from that teenage space into this adult space and learn, because life is all about that. It's all about making experience, learning, and readjusting.
All right. So basically bringing it down to the most fundamental thing, and that is, caring about each other, right? Because it started on the wealth inequality thing, which people began to see more and more clearly. But there's all these other issues too, that are important. But we can change all these things and have real participatory democracy with, a referendum or with, something of that equivalent.
Yeah.
So, because, everybody in France is required to have a yellow vest in their car. So it was really easy to say, just go to your car, get your yellow vest, and we'll see you on the Champs-Élysées or whatever,
Yeah, we'll see you on the streets.
Yeah.
Well, and it was one of those things that I think people, and especially in America, this is true, like to make fun of the French as being weak, and as the Simpsons line so famously said, you guys are, I think it was Willie the groundskeeper called them a bunch of like cheese-eating surrender monkeys or something like that. And it made me laugh as a kid. But it wasn't until you start kind of becoming aware of things, and outside of your history book in school that mentions that the French helped us win the Revolutionary War, it into modern times, like the French Revolution happened, and since then they have taken to the streets every time something has happened that they don't agree with in their government, and they've shut down the government, and they've had labor strikes, and they have now recently been and by their own choice, right, have been a fairly disarmed people for quite a while now, and have still found a way to give their government a hard time by mobilizing in the streets without violence, without the ability to overtake their government by force of arms or whatever, because they don't have guns.
That's right.
Just by being out there in the streets protesting and shutting down their government. And I think it is a huge fallacy on the part of Americans who are like, oh, you know, if we had to save the French in World War II. And like another joke I've heard is that like as soon as a French child learns to speak, they learn how to say I surrender in 5 different languages.
Oh yeah.
It's nonsense, and it is, I think, it's like a bully tactic by a group of people who have been unable to accomplish anything in their own government for a while, which is the situation with us here in America. Like, it's just...
And all over the world.
Yeah, there's
Really?
a lot of countries going downhill, and maybe they say the same things about the French. I don't know. But I've come to respect them quite a bit for their resolve over and it's not just recently, it's in the recent decades that I've been paying attention, that it's like, no, you guys are out in the streets throwing batteries at your public officials and making your presence known that you're not happy with this.
And they do things like
demanding change.
They have these garbage machines or whatever they are that shot out cow dung, and they
oh
you know,
yeah.
Have you seen that?
Oh, so good.
There's you know, that's the French, right? They want to make a message, but
Yeah.
that's their what's been understood, you know, is that peaceful protest. You can be creative with it, right? And so, yeah,
It's pretty creative.
it's pretty creative. I have to, say that's very interesting. You also go back to Moliere. I think they get the sense of humor from him,
Right.
apparently. But you know what's going on now with the yellow vest is that most of the violence is being committed by the police, or the gendarme, as they say in French.
Yeah, the agents provocateurs.
And of course, in the interview, if you watch the whole thing, you'll see, we go into detail about, how it began and the illusions that are created by the mainstream media as to what's going on.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And we still may not have received everything yet, all the information of what's really going on. But with, thanks to, social media, we see a lot more.
Right.
You know what I mean, than what we used to. So in modern times, we are, I think we're in a revolutionary era. I think when I first walked into City Hall of Occupy LA in early October of 2011, that was I still flash back to that moment when I had this feeling. I'm looking around all these tents. This is the beginning of a revolutionary era. That was the first thought that came to my mind, and I didn't think I was going to be seeing this in my lifetime. And now here we are in 2018, 2019, and we're seeing it go further. So,
absolutely.
Then there is now a growing interest here in Los Angeles, and of course, here is the first kind of flyer that's been done. And generally what it does, it focuses on the issues.
This looks like some kind of Green New Deal.
Yeah, Green New Deal is a part of it. Housing is a human right, public banking, health care for all, power to public schools, immigration reform, prison and criminal justice reform. And that's how it started, right? And
yeah.
So, I'm trying to do what I can to educate people also about, the constitutional citizens' democracy. How do you actually change things using constitutionally what we should be able to be doing in the first place? Why are we not able to do this?
Yeah, a lot
why
of
do
this
we
stuff
have
is already on the
representatives that
books.
aren't really representing us?
Right.
In other words, and we need, and people are too maybe complacent, about the situation, and it's time to not be so complacent anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and there's also, of course, the Green New Deal, which is now finally starting to get some traction as well because of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who is a freshman congresswoman from Long Island, New York, who is amazing.
Yeah, she is.
And it's just amazing what she's been able to do in just we're just barely
Just
into February.
Yeah, a couple months now.
It's unbelievable, the attention, and there's others too. I don't want to, marginalize, or seem to marginalize.
Well, there was a
anyone else,
huge
but-
influx of freshmen,
Right. It's that whole group.
House members that are. There's more females than ever before, right? There's more immigrants and religious non-Christians than ever before.
Right, and also there's a bisexual, I think.
Right.
And,
yeah.
So it's just these women are going to change.
And among them, people that have insisted on taking their oaths on books of law rather than holy books.
That's right. Exactly.
Which I think is, not to say that I don't appreciate the teachings of Jesus, but
right.
I think if you are taking your oath on a book of law, that says a lot more about your willingness to represent everyone in this country, regardless of their faith.
That's right. Or anything else. I
Yeah.
mean, as far as that goes. I mean, that's why we can go down all of the social justice issues, and say that it applies to everyone. Everybody should be equal. Period.
Yeah.
And then we'll work on how we can constitutionally make the changes, and referendum makes sense. So here in California, we have propositions for the state, we have measures for the cities. We almost got a public bank in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Measure B it was called, and it got 43% of the votes from people that went out to vote in the city of Los Angeles. So that's part of the Green New Deal, which we can talk about in the continuing part on YouTube. And so what's amazing about the referendum is that it definitely says to the representatives, you have to do what the majority actually says. We're giving you an actual document that we're voting on, and the majority says yes or no. This is a statement to you. You have to be accountable.
Yeah, it's like a modern day Magna Carta.
So do you have any closing thoughts for the moment?
Yeah, man, like stop making fun of the people that are out there trying to demonstrate and accomplish something for themselves. Like these old arguments and poking fun at people that live thousands of miles away from you that you've never met, and then you don't read the history on them. Watch what they're doing and watch what they're trying to accomplish, and if any of that stuff resonates with you, take it to heart, and stop being dismissive of other people's struggles, because at the end of the day, those struggles are yours as well. Like the same police officers that are beating on those protesters are the same police officers that are going to be beating on you when the thing comes up that you should be protesting about and that you will be trying to accomplish for yourself one day. And they're the ones that are not on your side. They're going to be doing the orders of the people who are your enemies. And all of this like thin blue line, like I support the police, but I also love my guns. That thin blue line is what's going to be taking your guns away whenever they're ordered to.
But at the same time, some of those people in those uniforms, they
Some
have
of them took
families
their-
and children too, and that's where a lot of the connections are being made. With bringing the right and the left together.
I've seen some of those videos too, where those police officers have taken their helmets off and stood with those people.
Yep.
So, I mean, there is that too. I think it should happen more.
And it will be continued. This is just the beginning to give you the intro of Yellow Vest. It's ongoing. And this is Niswander here with Norm Davis from the Truth Noir Show. And be present in the moment, always.
Yeah.
So many people asking me questions online, and every time they're like, okay, what do you think about the left and the right and blah, blah, blah. I say, guys, who cares about the left and the right? You don't understand that this is all division game. You don't understand that this is just wasting time. Get the power and educate your brothers and sisters, and you're going to see if the left and right would still exist in 10 years from now. Like the left and the right are only emanation of that division pattern, like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, left, right, religious, science.
Yes,
it's all about separation. It's all about like, why do we have to choose? When you get the power, like, you can have your opinion, and then if the majority of the population follow you, great. If not, then yeah, you need to work on your education. Okay, but today we are powerless, and we're fighting against each other to know who is right. And you're like, wait a second, it's ridiculous.
We all live here together, you know.
We all live together. So we are not here to fight together. We are here to fight against the people who are putting those situations in place. But if you have a referendum initiated by the citizen, you can control those people who are putting those rules in place. And if you disagree with them, you can actually say, no, I don't want that. And we're just going to ask, if the majority of the people said no, then it's going to be no. So therefore, there would be no point arguing about, is it right or wrong? The majority would say no, so therefore it would be no. If the majority say yes, it would be yes. And if you disagree with the majority, then work on the education. Give your argument. Explain why or how we should do it differently, and then trigger another national referendum based on a different idea or different concept to see if by changing that thing, maybe we can solve that problem. Like, it's all those patterns, those ridiculous things that we're doing and over and over and over again, hoping that it's going to change. And that's, again, psychotic.
Yeah, and it creates all the problems then create, you know, massive layers on top of each other, to where it gets so convoluted and so confusing. It's understanding when it's understandable when people are confused about,
especially when there's so much energy lost fighting each other.
That's
like
right.
All this energy that people are wasting, and I see that every day. Like I'm posting something explaining, guys, the yellow vest that has no politics, no union, no religion. It's peaceful. It's and they're like, but what do you think about the extreme right? Repeat. There's no politics. There's no religion. But what about the ultra left is infiltrating? Blah blah blah. I said, okay, yellow vest is no politics, and you have to repeat again and again because they don't get it.
Right.
They're like, we're going beyond that division, and we incorporate every citizen.
That's right.
How do you qualify a citizen? Is a citizen a dangerous person? Or is the citizen the smallest common denominator that can connect all of us?
That's right.
And how can you be in war with citizens? You can be in war with immigrants, you can be in war with poor people or rich people or blah, 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 but you can't be in war with yourself.
Yes.
So that smallest common denominator is what is connecting all of us. And it's so powerful because, first of all, there's no leader. And because there's no leader, then the government cannot really deal with us, because what they're going to try to do is to reduce like the group at its smallest expression. So therefore they can deal with that. And whoever those representatives are going to say, they're just going to work with them. So therefore all the other are going to agree, which is the union concept or representative concept. But when the whole people said, no, we don't want to have any representative, we want the referendum initiated by the citizen. How do you deal with that? How do you manage this? Like, you are going into a situation that the government were never prepared to work with. There's no people that can emerge and speak on the behalf of anyone, because no one wants to be represented anymore, because no one trusts represented anymore. And the only revendication that we're bringing is we want to be powerful. And if you are Democrats, if you're truly a Democrats, then you need to accept what we're saying, because you're saying that you get our power from us. So if you're saying that you get our power from us and you refuse to give the power to us back, then therefore you cannot say that we're in a democracy. You have to say we are in a dictature. So it's a real checkmate, political checkmate situation. There's no escape.
All right, back here with Norm Davis from Truth Noir. And the clip, howdy. That clip was about the power of referendum initiated by the citizens, for short, RIC. CIR is what it's called in Australia. So every country, I know Switzerland has their own referendums because I have family that lives there. And it's something that we can decide, there's no set way of doing it. We can say, okay, we want to have this petition, so many people have to sign it, and then so many registered voters have to vote, and then, then we go from there, right? And then we don't have to wait till the next election cycle is how I look at it.
Sure, yeah.
Because in Switzerland they don't. They just, within a matter of maybe a couple months, it's on the ballot. So within a few months of all this, what the temperature is of the people, right? I mean, so if it's part of your constitution and the representatives have to be accountable for what the actual real majority says based on the best system that we know we could come up with, it's not a rocket science. And as Roman Light said, there's somebody else, he's quoting somebody else, but never underestimate the power of a simple idea, because it will work. And that's probably why there's a lot of fear in the establishment.
I think it was V for Vendetta that he was quoting from.
Was that from V? Really?
I don't know if that was the original quote, but it was is when they shot up Codename V, and the police chief was like, "Why don't you die?" And he said, "Because behind this flesh lies an idea, and ideas are bulletproof."
Interesting. I have that movie. I need to watch it again. I became aware of that movie during Occupy, because
it was the perfect timing for it to come out too.
Oh yeah, and it was. Occupy was brilliant in that there were. With the live stream technology, it became popular, around that time, and so when they weren't live streaming actual real, events going on, they would have this video kind of going on. What do they call that? It's just constantly running.
Just on a loop.
On a loop,
repeating.
yeah. And there was, the scene of Guy Fawkes with all the dominoes.
Yeah.
They showed that. They had the final scene of the Great Dictator with Charlie
Chaplin, sure.
Which was shot right over here in Pasadena in front of City Hall.
Oh, really?
In was it 1932? I think it was.
Yeah.
You ever seen that movie?
I've seen the speech. I have not seen the whole movie.
The movie's actually a comedy. So, and then it ends on a serious note, which is really interesting. So it's, I guess, dark comedy. He was way ahead of his time. There was also a clip I saw of Bernie Sanders, actually, I guess when he was in the House, talking to Alan Greenspan, and saying something about
quit being evil.
Well, he was saying to him, like, I'm sure you're a nice guy, you mean well. He says, but Washington, he says, America is not like the Washington cocktail parties. You probably mean well, but you're not living in reality. And I remember watching this and thinking, like, who is this guy? How come I don't know who this is? You know what I mean? And then, was it just a few years later, or 2015, then he's running for president. I said, oh, heck yeah, I'm going to vote for this guy. I remember seeing him in the, you know what I mean? And so there's so many different, Occupy was important, as a stepping stone to get to where we are now. And actually the story is in this book here. And I'm actually quoted in it, actually.
Really?
Yeah, and it's called The Economic Elite versus the United States of America. And David DeGraw did the research.
Interesting.
And the economic research. He, as an investigative journalist, he focuses on corruption. And that's when he began to realize at that time, 2010, 2011, that 1% of the population, actually 0.01% more accurately, but he rounded it off like we do in math.
Certainly what it's become now.
Yeah, and it's they have 40% of the wealth. I mean, that's what it was then. It's actually worse now.
Yeah.
But then all of his blogs are in this book, and then if you were to Occupy, there was this thing called the mic check. Okay. And so I was one of the people he asked to, there's, Noam Chomsky in here, Tom Morello.
Oh, wow.
Nomi Prinz, Lee Camp, Max Kaiser.
Amongst royalty in the revolutionary movement.
and there's people in here that are from Occupy LA, and there's people from Occupy Wall Street. There's anonymous people in here that just you have an anonymous name. Like the style, there's a way that you know that they're identifying with anonymous. So it's an interesting book because it lays that all out, and he already was doing that. Now he's working on going even deeper into finding the corruption, which there's trillions of dollars now that can't be accounted for in many departments in the government. But I'll let him cover that because it's amazing stuff.
You know what happened last time that happened, right?
What are you referring to?
Well, the last time the government couldn't account for like trillions of dollars of money,
It was.
it was 9/11 that happened
I
the
see.
next
Yes,
day.
right. And I'm sure that's
Donald,
part of his
Donald
research too.
Rumsfeld was on September 10th was like, oh yeah, there's like $5 trillion missing from the budget.
Well, that's part of it.
And
That's
everyone
part of
was
his research.
all up in a lather about it. And then the people were like, that's awful. We're calling for, because $5 trillion was a lot more
Oh yeah, that's
20 years ago.
yeah, and that's how he's putting the pieces together. You know, now is what he's doing.
Yeah.
DeGraw Media, if you're interested in that. I've connected with him, so we'll see. And I don't know if he's ready to, publicly talk about it or not.
Sure.
But and there's other just incredible things going on. And like I say, we talked about the Green New Deal, which is a Sunrise Movement, working with Ocasio-Cortez and others, in the freshman team of women.
Sure.
And others that are, co-sponsoring all of this, and the Green New Deal. You can go to ocasio-cortez.congress.gov, and you can see the most recent draft of it. I don't know if it's the final one yet. It could be, but I'll be keeping an eye on that. I mean, it's a 14-page document. It goes into a lot of detail.
14 pages, that's too much.
Too much to read.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's definitely not. It's not anything like this, like most of these bills are.
Yeah, like the 9/11 report.
Yeah, exactly, right? But I noticed that some of the content in it was focused on, and this is just a few things: family farms, solar, wind, job creation, international exchange of technology, community ownership, which is really interesting, community grants, public banks, training for workers in this new technology to get ready for the new job creation, public investments and research for new and clean renewable industries. So in other words, a lot of that isn't just solar and wind, and renewables is in that way for electricity. It's also the complementary industries that will have to be in existence as well.
Like the maintenance and accessories.
Absolutely.
And
just
all
like there
that
is with the
stuff.
oil industry. I mean, you have to have the support, right?
Yeah.
And all of that as well. So, and the guaranteeing of the actual guaranteeing of jobs, or the guaranteeing of health care, the guaranteeing of strengthening workplace safety, on and on and on. So that word guarantee pops up.
Yeah, I mean, these are difficult things to do, but they're also things that other countries have done to their immense benefit, to the extent that their life expectancies are greater than ours and their stress index is way down.
Oh, way down.
Like way, way down.
And yeah, and do you realize that, I don't want to veer off into this conversation just yet, but one of the happiest places on earth in not the too distant past was actually Venezuela. When Chavez was president. That's a fact. It was one of the happiest places on earth. It was in that list. So, but before we get into that, the Green New Deal actually has a history, and this is one of the things that I think is the failure of the system we live in, is that slow, small, incremental change is the most we're supposed to expect if we have progress. That's part of the problem. Because I'll give you an example. You realize the Green New Deal was initially created. Of course, it's inspired by the Green Party. The Green Party, is involved in it, and there was a coalition of people putting this all together. And it was created in 2007. So obviously, it wasn't a priority issue. So you say, well, we're finally getting to it now in 2019. Yes, but slow, small, incremental change is maybe not quite as bad as doing nothing. But it is, when you're living in a time when 40 to 45% of the population can't afford basic necessities, that's slow, small, incremental change. It's got to be radically put into place so that we can, and it's not like there hasn't been this research. People aren't already doing it. I mean, the Paris Climate Summit was overly optimistic, apparently. So, Germany and China were working towards 100% renewables by 2040. So now the Green New Deal is pushing for 2030. So, I mean, we have, and Ocasio-Cortez is right, and her peers, we need to move this forward a lot more rapidly for various
especially
reasons.
with the climate stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we're already probably living on borrowed time as far as all of that goes. And also speaking to this, slow incremental change, like how many tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people have died since this New Deal was originally proposed? What was it, 12 years ago? 11 years ago?
12 years ago.
12 years ago, from preventable medical conditions.
Yep.
Because they couldn't afford health care, even though they had spent their whole lives working and paying taxes into a system that refused to care for them by
That's
the
right.
end of it. Like, it's disgusting.
It really is, especially when we're supposedly the richest country in the world.
Yeah.
And we can't, we
And
still
the
can't
greatest,
get health
and the
care.
greatest, Dan, I don't know if you were aware of this, we're the greatest country in the world.
Oh, that's right. Did somebody say that? Oh my Lord.
It might have used to be the case economically, but I mean, not anymore.
Well,
Like, that's not even
between the
true anymore.
70s and between the 50s and the 70s, there was that period right after World War II, where that some elites like to brag about, were the lifting of the boats and all that kind of stuff. And yes, that did happen. It did happen. But if you think about it, it's not a rocket science. We had factories and support system businesses that weren't bombed out after World War II, because the other focus of the growth of the industrial era was in where? Western Europe and Japan. Well, those areas were dramatically affected economically by World War II. So obviously, most of the business is
exactly.
going to come to the United States at first until they can build back up. And then once they build back up, that's when things started to change. And the wages flatlined, but that didn't stop the cost of living from going up. And that's what's been happening ever since.
Yeah.
Which is, that's one of the main ways that wealth inequality has been created in the world. And the fact that, we in this country, everything is based on the petrodollar, it seems, until we can transition. So the Green New Deal is a big deal, and it has to happen, right? But I got to get into this for a second. Is that people have talked to me, but Dan, the current system we have, look at all the progress it has, all this conveniences that we have, and everything like that.
It's not a whole lot of progress, though. It's a lot of stagnation these days.
And you can even go back to people like Albert Einstein, who really didn't like the idea of the atomic bomb. I mean, and that's part of this so-called industrial progress, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be so great. But Albert Einstein understood the limitations of it to the point where that was his greatest concern as a human being on this planet.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with industrialization, like the manufacture of photovoltaics and renewable, like that's going to be an industry that
That's
is
right.
industrial, but it's not going to be responsible for all of the horrible acid rain that they have on the West Coast or on the East Coast from all of the coal mines and all of the stuff that your ancestors were dying from the black lung over.
That's right.
Like, you could just retrain all of those people.
Well,
Be like, hey, you want to die of the black lung?
Yeah.
Or do you want to put solar roof tiles on people's houses?
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is that, I, as a kid, even growing up in Middle America, in Ohio and Indiana, I remember walking to school one day in a town called Fremont, Ohio, and I think I did have to walk to school, because I couldn't get the bus. If you were just far enough away, like you had to be 10 blocks, and I may have lived 9 blocks away, you know what I mean, to get the bus.
So you had to walk uphill.
So I had to
in
walk
the snow.
Yes,
both ways.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I remember I clearly have this memory in my head of walking out of the house and seeing all this black soot we just had a fresh fallen snow the night before, and there's all this black soot all over this beautiful snow. And I remember thinking, even as a young kid, like, oh, that can't be good. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, right.
where did this come from, and what is this? You know what I mean? And it was from the coal plant in the area.
Yeah.
You know, and then many places where I lived, and I moved around a lot. These streams, the rivers, the creeks, the lakes, filthy, nasty. Sometimes you could even see the chemicals in them or whatever, you know. And looking around and seeing all the trees and what was left of the birds and everything like that. I remember thinking again as a kid, again from the perspective of a kid, this must have been really beautiful not that long ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? So when people say that humans didn't have something to do with that, I beg to differ. Just from that personal experience, let alone all the scientific data that we have.
Right.
You know, proving that humans did make an impact. And we're going to get more updates on this show about exactly what the statistics are as far as, from JPL NASA, I'm hoping. My friend Erica will come back and give us an update on what she's seen and what she's discovered.
Right on.
But you know, in the meantime, you know, we really do, you know, this is a symbol. This is a symbol of the working class, and there's issues that we now can come together with using this as the commonality. And as I showed you, I already have what some of the French people have on the back of their vest, which is RIC. Which stands for Referendum Initiated by the Citizens. That's basically saying referendum to constitutionally be able to change the law using citizens' participatory democracy. And each country can do it their own way, but essentially it's the same kind of idea. You got a clipboard with a petition on it. You get a certain percentage of people's names on it. It becomes submitted for a national vote, and then whatever that majority vote is, that's the final declaration.
Yeah, which by itself
unless you want to change it.
Yeah.
Do it again because you don't like the outcome or whatever.
Well, I was going to say, by itself, like, this is not an easy thing to do. Like, if you want to get 1% of the population to agree to something, let alone 70% or whatever, like, that's still, like, the argument I hear every once in a while is like, well, it's too easy for bad actors to come in and change something. You know, it's like, well, it's probably not going to happen. Like, you still have to, in a place like France, I think their population is something like 30 million or something like that. That's still 300,000 votes or signatures that you would have to get. In a country like America, where it's 330 million, that's 3.3 million signatures that you have to get before you can insist that something be put on the ballot. That's no small task.
That's no small task, and that's probably why, you know, California has to lead the way, because we are the 6th largest economy in the world, I believe, in the world.
I think we've been bumped up to 5th.
5th, oh wow.
As of last year.
So that's where, you know, we play a very important role in that.
I think the Marvel Universe for that, like, they're probably responsible for us being number 5 now.
Oh really? That's probably true,
think,
right?
Like, they're responsible for like billions of dollars in revenue just by themselves.
That's true, and you know, and you pay your people enough that the money goes into the economy, and before we get into that, I'd like to end on that, and then recap on the yellow vest. But before we do the cooperative economy stuff, which is another part of what I think solutions are, and I just think you never can repeat things too much sometimes, because you want people to see it, right, and to hear it and ask questions. But let's talk briefly about Venezuela.
Yeah,
talk
sure.
about what's going on in the world right now and how that can impact all of us. It's quite a mess, and I'm still doing some research on it. Because obviously, I think when it comes right down to it, though, Norm, it's about oil. And people can say it's this, that issue, or whatever, you know, the Chavistas or the National Assembly, or, you know, the corporate state. Well, I think the corporate state has a lot to do with it, actually. But the focus is on the oil, right? So, in other words, who's going to get the primary benefit of that oil? I think that's the real question.
Yeah, well, I think a while back, America learned that you don't have to invade another country like some kind of, you know, ancient king with your army and bring the other king to heel and have them give you all of their stuff, all of their gold reserves or whatever. They just found that you can send in operatives and destabilize an economy and then just go back 20 years later.
That's right.
And I think that's what started happening when Chavez wouldn't play along with baby Bush and started calling him the devil in front of the UN and stuff, which I thought was fantastic.
That was hilarious.
But then it created this sort of, okay, well, you're not going to play ball. Now we have to destabilize your economy somehow. And then this has been happening for like the last 5 years.
And all the, this is where, you know, the area I'm trying to figure out is that because when it comes to the oil, obviously it had a peak, you know, just like the stock market.
Sure.
Any stock, you know, it has a peak and then it has a low, right? So it literally was, you know, jumping back and forth. And the mistake, I think the biggest mistake that Maduro probably made, and perhaps even Chavez, was not helping the country to diversify the economy more, right? So if you're going to be most dependent on the oil reserves, because they're the largest deposits in the world, you know, and they're certainly the largest reserves right now, which is why, again, that's everybody wants a piece of that, right? It's,
sure.
It's not your land. Leave them alone, you know, is my view on that.
First and foremost.
Yeah, you would think, right? Sovereign nations, you know, what do you think? If somebody wanted to come here to, let's say they discovered new oil in Oklahoma, and
all of a sudden the Venezuelans are coming over
right,
here.
Venezuelans came here and they want to take our Oklahoma oil. What do you think the people would immediately like rise up and say, you're not taking our land, you're not taking our oil?
Well, yeah, and I think the vast majority of people
They don't see the reciprocatory.
Yeah, they're either giant hypocrites or they are ignorant to the point where they don't understand that this is what we've been doing to countries for the last at least 100 years, since like Colombia and the Panama Canal region. Like this is what we've been doing. Like that immigrant caravan didn't come from nowhere. They wouldn't feel the need to be flocking to the country that destabilized their region for help if we hadn't been down there a couple decades before, arming the Sandinistas, and probably MS-13 is our fault too. Like all of these things are reciprocal, and they're coming back to visit us now.
Yes, and you know, and I don't know if you're familiar with the book by Naomi Klein. It's called This Changes Everything is her book about climate change, but she's got a book called Shock Doctrine, and it goes into detail about you know, how we've intervened in Central and South America and also the Middle East for who knows how long now, overturning. You know, in some cases we took out, you know, dictators, but a lot of cases we took out leaders that were, right, most of the time we installed them rather than took them out, and we took democratically elected leaders out and installed dictators. That's mostly what we did. That's not all. There were a few exceptions here and there, and there are such things as more benevolent dictators than others. I mean, people are human beings, right? It's like nothing's going to be perfect, but just the fact that we intervened in other countries' sovereignties, that in itself is illegal. That's a world war crime.
Yeah, well, and then it's speaking to that, like we are one of the only members of the UN that is like not, how do you say, like we're a member of the UN, but we're not, like none of its rules apply to us.
Well, that's because we, you know, the UN's in New York City, so somehow there's a lot of funding from the United States goes into
delete documents down the memory hole.
Wow, I know we could go on and on about that, but it's I thought that had to be brought up because there's still research going on for those who, you know, because I've seen you know, arguments on both sides. And it seems like both sides have missing information, and once we're able to connect the dots, then we can really get a more realistic view of it. But yeah, but the bottom line is it's all about oil and the petrodollar and how that's being challenged and the history of all of that. and the fact that they have the largest reserves in the world in Venezuela. So to leave that part out of the discussion, and also to realize that you can say that the elections were rigged, but these same people that are talking about the elections being rigged, the Maduro elections, are the same people that are behind the rigging of our own elections here in the United States, if you ask me.
Right.
And both parties, by the way, are guilty of different things, and just it's a
Sure.
mess. It's a mess. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to attempt to know the facts all the way around in detail, but I think everybody knows. Everybody knows.
Yeah, everyone has that kind of gut instinct that things aren't right.
Yep.
And there's so much propaganda and there's so much misinformation that the only thing left is your gut now. And sometimes your gut, faced with all of this stuff, its only reaction is to is to act out.
Right.
And we see that a lot on social media. Is like we have people saying awful things to each other.
I know, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up because
like stuff you would never say to my face. Like
I
people
know.
are like, oh, It's
I know.
like
we got to get back to essentially, caring about each other.
ethics and compassion.
Yeah. And that's what this whole thing, this should be the whole focus of all of this discussion, is that you just care about other people, have compassion.
We're more on the same side than either of us understands, kind
That's
of thing.
right. And that's why even in the streets of France, and the left and the right and the center and it doesn't matter what you're, if you're political or you're not, or you're, if you're one race or the other, or
it's like,
whatever your age is, it's everybody.
You're in the same boat too.
That's
Stand
right.
with me.
Exactly, and that's what's scaring the establishment, the government, is that people are starting to put two and two together, because it really is. Don't never underestimate the power of a simple idea, which is that.
Yeah.
So thank you for Yellow Vesters and thank you for the French for a very wonderful simple idea.
Absolutely.
To help awaken the masses of the world. So I wanted to, before we wrap this up, I wanted to mention, along with referendums, we do have to have long-term solutions, and the UK left wing of the Labour Party has a manifesto, and there's a big section in it called Democratize the Economy. And a big part of it is about cooperative economy. In other words, ownership. In other words, ownership of business. And I'm not just talking about sole proprietors and things of that nature. I'm talking about basically worker
Collective
cooperatives, where the workers are the owners. They make all the important decisions instead of a board of directors, like what we have in traditional corporations. They're involved in the work. Plus, you have one person, one vote. You decide. On things as a group. What do you want to produce? How do you want to produce it? Where? Even how much you pay yourself, when you work, and what to do with the profits, surpluses afterwards. And people don't understand, again, getting the power. They don't understand that you have no say. Unless you are a worker owner, you have no say. And then that is a simple idea that I want to convey to people.
Yeah.
I like this little sticker here. It says abolish human rentals, support worker cooperatives. And that's one part of the cooperative economy. The next part is community cooperatives, community land trusts, community gardens, and then there's the public cooperatives. Like when you pay taxes, you want to know where your taxes go. So in the UK, when the private sector took over the rail, the public transportation, and also the post office, the Royal Post Office, they took it over, and people saw how that was a disaster. So now Jeremy Corbyn, who's the leader of basically the Labour Party, and he's from the far left side, he says, well, let's put this back in. Let's put this back in the public sector. Let's put the public transportation, let's put the post office back in the public sector because it worked better. So that's part of the cooperative sharing. And then also too, when we create solar and wind industries, or what's it called?
Hydroelectric.
Yeah.
Tidal. It's where they put the turbines in the ocean with.
Yes. All of that is in the public sector, so
It's kind of
the
a shoo-in,
public
right?
can decide, not the private sector. The public can decide how this should be done and all of that, and that's all the elements, right? Even what happens with any profits that are made, where does that go?
Yeah.
You know, because the public's going to decide on their own behalf, right? Not in what's the behalf of a small group of people. It's a brilliant idea, and that's what's scaring, I think, some of the people, even in the center of the Labor Party, let alone the Tories, is that they know that the public's going to like that.
Absolutely.
It's going to be preferable.
Well,
So
yeah,
we need that, again, I think that we're starting to see that in the Green New Deal proposal, some of that. So I'm excited about that. So that Green New Deal, let me give you a couple websites. Well, I'll put them in the closing credits. You can see those websites.
Well, I think it would spurn a lot of innovation as well, because when you get people together that are doing a thing and they're faced with a decision of like, okay, we all live locally, we all do this thing together, maybe we need to up our yield of production on whatever it is. Do we want to do the thing that's going to poison all of the land around us? Or do we want to figure out a better way? Well, then you're going to invent something that will help you increase your yield for more people, and then also not be toxic.
That's right.
Maybe, you know, and if you had...
That'd be a good idea, don't you think?
Yeah, and if you had a lot of people in a lot of different areas, you could share those ideas, and it's just good ideas.
Exactly.
Instead of like, well, can I make money on this? Well, no, then you don't get to have it.
Exactly. It's not all about making money. Again, it's back to just caring for each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That should be the priority in our minds all the time, and not money, not material things, which is what our current system does focus on. Let's get real.
Right.
You know, and it's not real when it comes to life on this planet. It's not real when it comes to the quality of life. You know, why should most of the benefits go to the people that run the system that works for them? It doesn't make any sense. So we're going to wrap it up here now. So remember, Yellow Vest, Rick, referendum initiated by the citizens, okay? And that means basically citizen participatory democracy using what's already in place or adding to it with constitutions. And that's something that can apply anywhere, even here in the United States. And more, this is just the beginning of that story, and there's more to be continued, and it's always a pleasure, Norm. I mean, we have great conversations.
Likewise, man.
You know,
you'll have to come on Truth Noir again one of these days soon, and
I'd love to.
We'll rehash a couple of these.
Exactly, and we can help create that network of creating coalitions, which is another thing that we're about here on the Nowman Show, as well as having fun. And fun to the nth degree, and staying in the present moment. So thank you so much for tuning in and watching us here in the extended version on YouTube. And thank you, Norm Davis from Truth Noir. And until next time, this is Niswander. Stay present in the moment, always.